hope so.
Absolutely. And where are you? Are you still in Boston?
No, I'm in Georgia.
Oh, sorry. Of course, we know that. Yeah.
Yes, okay. That's all right. Hey, we're just having a good time here, and I have my screen on backwards because I'm kind of distracted in a good way. So let me figure out how this goes. And I really would like to get the picture of our guest in the corner, if it would let me do that. There we go. Okay, so hello, everybody. We're so glad you're listening, whether live right now or in the archives on my YouTube channel. But if you are live, the chat box is open and we want you to interact and communicate with us because we love people to talk to us. But let me introduce our guest. Let's see what we got here. Make sure I'm looking at the right page. The Tao of Hoop is a philosophical memoir about how the humble hula hoop transformed one woman's life. Let's make it two because it transformed mine too. But seriously though, Ann Humphreys was not aware that she didn't understand how to feel, something we don't learn about in school, until she very randomly, through crushing on a hot dude, found the hula hoop at age 35. Having endured a life-altering loss as a teenager, Ann had learned to handle grief and pain through the time-honored Southern traditions of denial and repression. The hula hoop broke those old patterns, allowing her to meet a new wave of challenges with a clear mind and an open heart. Part story, part treatise, part inquiry, part self-help guide, The Tao of Hoop is a raw, poetic, and captivating read you will have a hard time putting down. Let us welcome the author of this new book from Carrboro, North Carolina, Ann Humphreys. Welcome, Ann.
Hi.
Hey. How is the weather today in Carrboro?
Well, I'm here in Seattle on my book tour.
Oh, goodness gracious.
North Carolina is always with me.
Oh, my goodness gracious. This is wonderful.
Isn't that wonderful? My wonderful hostess, Ariana, who was living, is also from North Carolina and moved out here to Seattle. And she has been hosting me, and she made this wonderful piece of artwork.
I love it. It's really cool. Let me see if I can get you full screen so we can really see the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yes. Isn't it lovely? Wait, I'm moving the wrong. I keep doing this mirror effect. I can't. Right?
I know this.
Isn't it just? It's beautiful. And she is incredible. She's an artist. Just amazing. She's a designer and an artist. Yeah.
What state is that again?
Oh, this is North Carolina.
Okay.
I have left my heart.
Okay.
And Ariana has too.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're with us today. And I'm playing with the technology here, trying to get it right for both of us. Okay. So let's talk about your book by defining a word in the title that, believe it or not, I don't know what it is. And maybe some of our listeners don't know. What is Dao?
Dao. So Dao is a concept. It's a Chinese word. So the T is pronounced as a D. And we, as far as, the Tao is something I embrace my ignorance. I'm aware of my cultural ignorance, which is part of the reason why I spent the book kind of defining Tao as I understand it. My understanding of Taoism comes from the ancient writings of its main kind of visionary, which is Lao Tzu. And so it is a philosophy that, as I understand it, and I'm only one person, but that the Tao is a term meant to denote the flow of life, the way, the path. And those are more direct translations from Chinese to English. As I understand it, I don't speak Chinese. I don't read or write Chinese, especially not ancient forms of it. And I'm sure there's many different iterations of the language as it has moved through the centuries and many centuries that it has existed in spoken and written form. But The Tao as a term means simply way or path. And then Taoism, as I understand it, is a method of connecting with that flow, that way, that path. So that's like the simplest possible definition that I can give.
Okay. So I'm starting to see how Dao could relate to hula hoop. So why don't
Mhm.
you share with us, for those that aren't familiar with your backstory as a teenager and how you came at 35 to start hooping? How did that all piece together?
Well, it happened very accidentally and randomly, as the book jacket says. I was actually in a very depressed state. I was actually experiencing PTSD, which was a pattern that developed for me after my dad's death, which is another topic that I cover in detail in the book. And I was
Uh,
only 19 when he died. And thereafter, I had a lot of trouble with breakups. I would become triggered when my relationships would end, and I would be unable to deal with my feelings. But I didn't, at that time, I was trying to deal with my feelings by finding ways to not feel them.
yes,
And
I can relate. Yes.
so that was something, and that was not something that I didn't that was not something that I viewed as a problem at the time.
Mhm.
I mean, I did view it as a problem, but I felt like the problem was I need to not feel this. I need to figure out how to stop feeling this. And so I was in one of those states, feeling very desperate, sad. I was chain smoking, I was binge drinking at the time. I was doing anything that I could to distract myself from my pain. The last thing I wanted to do was feel it. And so
Yes.
I was in that state and I was just walking my dog. And I walked by Weaver Street Market, which is our local co op grocery store in Carborough, the venerable institution of many decades. And it was a place that I hung out constantly. Everybody is kind of there every day. And people were sitting outside. And so I was walking by and thinking, okay, I'm just going to grab a coffee. I don't really want to see anybody. So I was trying to kind of go around and go in the side door. And I saw this motion in the center of the sitting area, because there was also like some open space where people would dance when they had live music at times. This was not one of those times. So it was very unusual to see somebody dancing when there was no live music.
Mm.
And I just saw this like guy dancing and it was like, what is that? I kept looking at him, and then it was like such a beautiful movement. I couldn't stop staring. And then I was like, that's that cute guy that is always here for breakfast. And so that was really weird. But then the last thing I realized was that he was moving with an object. And at first, I just couldn't put it together. Like, what is that thing around him? Like, that's so weird. And then suddenly it was like, oh my God, that's a hula hoop. He is hula hooping. And the movement was so graceful, so slow, that's why I couldn't kind of put it together at first. Like, what was he doing? And I was drawn in, and it very much reminded me even then of the Sufi dervishes. So
Yes, the whirling dervishes. Yes.
yes. And so because he was turning, and I just was frozen in place. And then, I thought, oh, I've got to meet that guy. And then just so happened to meet him a couple days later with a mutual friend. And I also could not hula hoop as a child. So it was not that I was wanting to hula hoop myself.
Mhm.
It was that I just wanted to get to know this guy. That was me. And then I happened to meet him through this mutual friend, and went to my first hoop class. So there's more to it than that, but I don't want to.
Well, this is an interesting story, and I can relate to the crush on the guy kind of thing, and I can also, unfortunately, relate to PTSD.
Mm.
And having been traumatized by my stepfather, and didn't I did what I could not to feel, which included taking drugs and drinking too much booze, which fit my lifestyle as a rock and roller. So I was always high. And between that and the free toot, or the snow, I didn't come down until my 30s, and I crashed and started having flashbacks of,
Mm.
you call them triggers. Certain
Mhm.
things would trigger, and I was out of control. Had to go to counseling, and I asked the counselor, why am I having these feelings now? And she simply said, because now you're strong enough to face it, and it's time to do the work. So I can really empathize with what you're saying. And the hula hoop is an amazing tool. Uh, Interesting for you that it comes to this hot guy that's doing the hoop thing. I mean, that's okay now. That's one way to get a girl. But so tell me, what happened with the two of you? Did you have a relationship, or was it strictly hooping?
Well, what happened was I had a very close friend named Kim Wan, who is also a main character of the book and is in fact the hero of the book. And so he wanted to, I keep wanting to like block this thing in the bit, sorry. Um, he really wanted to go to the hooping class. And so he ended up taking me to my first hooping class. And I went to several hoop classes, and I was under the impression that Baxter and I were talking. And, I thought he had taken a little shine to me. And
Uh,
so I went to several hoop classes. And then one of the hoop classes, this girl showed up. She was not a hooper. She
mm.
was not even hooping, but she was filming the class. And I realized in the course of her being there that she was his girlfriend. And so I was absolutely stricken, and I could not go back to the class after that. And so, but I still had a hula hoop. So I did hoop a little bit on my own for the next year. And then the following summer, I got a MySpace friend request from Baxter. And it was Baxter. Baxter was the cute guy who was twirling in the public space. And I had gone to his, went to Baxter's weekly hoop class, and then got this friend request. And then he wrote me a couple of messages, and I was like, wow, that's really nice and friendly. But I was kind of thinking, he wants me to come back to the hoop class. It's too embarrassing. Like, I was thinking he was just trying to like promote his class kind of thing. People who had been before.
Soliciting business, huh? Yeah.
That's what I thought at first. And then he wrote me, he wrote me a few messages. And then in one message, he was like, oh, I didn't realize you were dating Dave. And I was at that time seeing two people named Dave. My ex-boyfriend and his friend. And it was just,
Well, this is getting to be a story.
ridiculous.
You're gonna have to write a sequel book, I think.
Oh my God. I don't know if much of this stuff is worth repeating, but what I do know is that as soon as I got that message, I wrote him and I was like, I'm not dating Dave. I want to date you. And then I panicked and called him. I went and got his phone number from the
Oh,
bar where he worked. I was so panicked that he was going to just be like, oh, she's dating somebody, forget it, and like meet somebody else. And I was just like, no, wait. No, I want to be with you. So of course I started acting kind of whatever. I mean, we had a wonderful almost 4-year relationship that started
oh.
then. And he is still my best friend.
Wow, that's very cool. And I saw a video about Baxter that he created break hooping or paddling.
Yes,
So
stopping the hoop and paddling it along in its current.
yeah, and I think that's interesting because I've only been hooping for about a year, I guess now. I thought it had
Oh,
been like 9 months, but somebody corrected me and said, no, you've been hooping for a year. But whenever I try to shoulder hoop and stick my arm in the circle, the hoop just falls down. So I'm wondering at some point in this interview if
oh,
you have a tutorial that can help people like me that have
yeah.
stiff shoulders. So speaking of stiff shoulders, this is the perfect segue to look at a video of you hooping, where I think this is the one where you say that you started out hooping and your shoulders were so stiff, and I'm thinking, they're not stiff to me.
My arms were like very stiff and straight down.
Yeah.
I think this is the one I'm thinking of.
Oh, so let's look at this video here.
No, no, this is. I not only learned how to hula hoop, I learned how to dance. And not only did I learn how to dance, I learned how to feel. How to feel my physical embodied sensations, and also how to feel my emotions. It's not something that people talk about a lot.
I learned a lot about how to just live inside a human body. I learned how to dance my pain and dance my joy. And then I spent 8 years writing a book about it.
It's called the Tao of Hoop, on the transformational practice of hula hooping. Seriously though, I wrote it for you.
Yes, you wrote it for us. I think this is wonderful. Wonderful. Just so graceful flow. I can't imagine. I guess I don't have the video of you actually saying where your arms
It's
were.
the very beginning. It's the very of that was the promo for my Kickstarter. And so at the very, very beginning, I showed my very first hooping video in March of 2007.
Wow. I mean, so what flow you have and such dance. And I mean, this is just so amazing. I have so many questions because I'm a new hooper myself.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get the stamina first when somebody wants to hula hoop, I'm talking about beginners. It's frustrating enough trying to get the right hoop as an adult. Then when you finally figure that out, and if you don't know how, there's plenty of YouTube videos that tell you how to get the right hula hoop as an adult. But then developing the wind, the muscular endurance to be able to hoop maybe longer than 2 or 3 minutes took me like 5 months. And now to be able to hoop in both directions, I'm able to do that now. So there's a process. And then what's next as far as trying to achieve the flow state that you're talking about, the Dao?
Well, one of the many wonderful things about starting with Baxter, learning from Baxter, and having the benefit of his 4 years of hooping experience. When I started, Bax had been hooping for 4 years, 2 hours a day, every day. And he called that flight time. And it was very useful to begin my hoop journey with this concept of flight time, which Bax measured in hours, not days or months. So, your flow journey made a lot more sense looking at it from that perspective, because for everybody, the first 1 to 25 hours of flight time have the potential to be extremely awkward. For everybody, the first hour of flight time is very awkward. So for a lot of people that might want to hoop, sometimes they might be in that first hour of flight time and feeling like, oh, I can't do this. And I can't get the hoop going. Like, I'm never going to be able to learn this. But people also don't realize, like, flight time, you get a whole lot out of what you put in. And it's a very steep learning curve at first. And then you have a number of very satisfying plateaus, some of which you've already experienced, where if you've then put in 5 or 10 or 20 hours of flight time, then you can usually hoop in both directions. Then you can start to move, to turn. Everything that I teach on the core, as far as you were talking about getting your arms in, and I have more tutorials that I can also share about. But everything that I teach on the core is based on turning with the hoop. I understand the turn in the center of the hoop as the engine of core hooping. So I'm not talking about off body with a smaller hoop and throwing the hoop around. There's still, basically, once you take the hoop off your core, you take it off your central spine, then you have a different center of push, and you're doing the same thing, but with an arm or a leg or whatever. But when you're talking about that central meridian, your technique is going to open up, especially up at the shoulders, where you're taking up so much more of the center of the hoop, if you learn how to step the feet in these very predictable and regular and circular ways underneath the current of the hoop. So for me, I spent a whole lot of time learning things slowly. That was another wonderful thing about learning with Baxter. In our hoop classes, we would have a hoop class every week. And then later on, he would do 2 classes per week, and we would go on the weekends teaching, and I would have these, 9 hours of workshop every weekend. So I had all this time spent drilling down on very specific fundamentals. Baxter revolutionized a number of things in hooping, not only breaking and paddling, also hooping in both directions, which of course goes along with breaking and paddling. Also contextualizing the practice with the hoop as a personal practice and not as a preparation to a performance. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was just another way, especially back then, people who were learning hooping were kind of hooking people into, oh, you can learn how to fire perform. You can learn how to choreograph. You can, create a very beautiful performance. But for me and for a lot of other people, we were not interested in performing. And so this whole idea of it being a personal practice, that enabled me to spend all this time on these super simple techniques. Also using the blindfold. That was another magic thing that Baxter brought into my hooping life. Using the blindfold, going within. We would talk about being within the hoop, and feeling. And so for me, the main message of the book, The Tao of Hoop, is you can learn how to feel. I learned how to feel from my hula hoop. And what I mean is how to feel as distinct from thinking. Because what had been happening before that my whole life, which I did not realize, was that I was always trying to, and successfully, getting in front of my feelings with thoughts. I was solving or trying to solve my feelings with thoughts. And so that was something that I was doing that was actually preventing me from feeling my feelings fully. And so it wasn't until the big hoop, the blindfold, moving slowly, going within, that I had the space in my being to distinguish between a physical feeling, an embodied sensation, and the act of thinking.
I mean, this is all profound, very deep spiritual food. You're listening to Ann Humphreys, and we're talking about her new book, A Tao of Hoop. And everything you're saying personally resonates with me, because I also was the teenager that disassociated from my physical body after being abused, walked around like in my head all the time, shut off my feelings, didn't know how to react or respond correctly to certain triggers. I was always overreacting, always taking things way too personally, always getting more wounded, and didn't know how to hide my pain. So you mentioned that you dance your pain. Can you tell us what that is?
That, as I understand it, that was an extension of just learning to dance and learning to feel. That I began, as when I became able to feel as its own experience, I became willing to feel the full range of my emotions. And then as that happened, I found that I could bring all of those emotions into my movement. And so dancing my pain might be throwing myself on the floor. Dancing my pain might be breaking as fast as I can. It might be spinning. There were many times in my early hoop life, following the beautiful embodied example of my hoop sisters, Vivian Spiral, who is one of our original hoopers of North Carolina, and Julia Hartzell, who were the reason why Baxter got into the hoop. They both practiced a spinning technique that was very much like dervish spinning. And so there was just so much freedom in this act of moving with my emotions. We had so much permission with Baxter and the blindfold and the space that he provided in those early days just to be. And also he described, the practice space. And we of course cultivated that in our life together too. Having the space and time to be with the body, to be with the embodied sensations, and really not having an agenda like, I'm going to have to dance, in this particular way to release this particular emotion. Really just following the feelings. That was a revelation. My hope is that even in there's a scene in the book of my first hoop class, and I feel that freedom even then. I'm hoping to share with the reader how even even though I didn't understand what was happening and I was still kind of like, whoa, this is wild, but I was still being taken to a freer, wider place. And it was just such a revelation. All these people are, hi. Oh, how sweet.
Yes, we're glad you're in the chat box. Please post your comments. Somebody's listening from Amsterdam. And we're talking to Ann Humphreys, and she has a new book out called The Tao of Hoop. And we're talking about processing or reestablishing with your own feelings that you may have shut off through trauma or abuse or whatever, and you're trying to put yourself together again, like Humpty Dumpty, so to speak. And the hula hoop is the tool of choice here for both of us, both for Ann and myself. Good afternoon, Tony. And we are talking about taking hula hoop in our circle, our sphere. You relate to the hula hoop and the air or the existence around us and in the hoop as infinite, a sphere. So how do I, as somebody that's not familiar with that terminology, look at myself and my hoop and think of myself in a sphere, infinite?
Thank you for that question. That is an image that I've used in my own teaching. So I learned with Baxter for many years, and then I transitioned into teaching on my own when we separated as a couple and remained best friends forever. And but what I enjoyed about that practice was that I would sense myself in the center of the hoop, and that my own spine was the the center line of it. It is the center. My own, when I'm inside the circle of my hoop, my own spine is the center of that circle, of that rotating circle. And so that also, when I'm teaching people how to turn and step with the hoop, I'm asking people to make their steps equal, so in part to keep the spine in the center of the rotating hoop. And if you extend that metaphor to the whole body and to the universe of movement that is open to you as a dancer, I like to envision that there is a sphere surrounding me of potential movement. So my hands and arms might move in any direction at any moment. I have choice. I am not predetermined. I do not, there are ways that I can cooperate with the hoop and ask it to cooperate with me, but there is an unlimited and unknown even, like, number of movements, patterns of movements that are available to me in the center of my hoop. And I love that metaphor, not only for dance, but also in life. It has been instructive to me that, like, I am in a center. I am always centered. I am always in myself. I always know where I am. I always know how I feel. And when I am there, I always have choice. I can move my right hand. I can move my left hand. I can step forward. I can step back. I can choose not to move. That for me, both in movement and in life, has been really instructive, helpful, expanding, to have a physical metaphor that I can inhabit, that shows me that I do always have choice. That even though my mind and my emotions and the memories and the patterns want to continue, I am at the center and I can choose to change the pattern. I don't have to break the pattern. I don't have to destroy everything, because it's infinite. It contains everything. I don't have to destroy my past. I don't have to, everything is perfect as it is. That it's as we know, in our highest self. And for me, inhabiting that movement space really helped me to build that skill in life.
That's good. That's very good. And you're listening to Ann Humphreys, and she's talking about her book, The Tao of Hoop. And as somebody that is approaching this philosophy of healing, because this is a healing center, and if somebody, let's say I'll use myself as an example. If I was 30 years ago coming out of crisis and trying to heal and reconnect my head to my body, which is one of the things that attracted me to yoga, because I had to pay attention to my body for the first time. I was always removed from my own physical self. And the triggers that you talked about, which, as somebody that suffers with PTSD, anxiety is a huge issue, which even permeates into my sleep. So I get the hula hoop, let's say, and I'm trying to learn, and I've gone through this flight time where I'm at a point of beyond the awkwardness, except I still can't put my hands in the hoop yet. But what is the path of me getting to the flow state where I actually am feeling safe, feeling again, where I can actually, and what about if an emotional release happens and all of a sudden I'm remembering how I felt at 13 when I was molested in the hoop? I mean, do these things come into the flow state, or do those things not pop up while you're pursuing your healing in a hoop?
Well, there is a scene in the book which I hope will speak to what you're saying, and I'll just very briefly describe it. But let me just first emphasize that for people who are embracing the hoop for as a healing practice, I just want to emphasize again the importance of a practice space that is safe for you specifically. You know, there's a hoop class, there's a hoop jam, but those are shared and in some ways social experiences. So I would caution hoopers who are working with a lot of pain to make sure, or movers, dancers, anybody who's we're trying to just move things through the body. My belief is that it's very important to have a space, a sacred space of your own where you know you are safe and where you can move into some of these memories and these traumas that we do carry in our bodies. We carry them in our minds and we carry them in our bodies. And so I think that is the most important thing I would emphasize, is creating a safe space for yourself. And if you don't feel safe by yourself, finding a buddy, a flow buddy, a hoop buddy, something, whatever you need. Maybe it's your dog. Maybe it's, I mean, you know, pets sometimes don't love the whirling hoop, but again, opening into that idea of the infinite sphere, like what is it that I would need? Like not assuming ahead of time that I can't have, or that it won't work out. Just what if things were perfect? Where do I feel the safest? Outside on the grass? Do I feel the safest in my own room? Do I feel the safest in a studio where I have, you know, I can lock the door or whatever it is? And then I would just also think about, if you're hooping with the specific intent of bringing feelings forward. So the story that I was referring to, that I had an experience in my hoop early on where I was like, you know, for months I was just like, oh my God, this is just like bliss, euphoria, you know, nothing but bliss. And I had an experience where I was with Baxter and Chemo, who are the two main characters of the book. And I started to feel insecure just randomly. And it just completely, it just exploded into like what a lot of people would consider a panic attack. And I think that I did not experience it in that way, but it was a unique experience for me, where that was for me the very first time I felt something other than bliss and euphoria inside my hoop. And instead, I felt what it unleashed was a terror. It was an existential terror that was bottomless. And it was a feeling that I have not confronted actually before or since. It was so much more pure, this terror, this fear, which is at the bottom of, my belief is that we only have a few primary colors of emotion kind of underneath it all. That's been simplifying and helpful for me in navigating, learning how to feel, that like ultimately just about all feelings can fall into joy, anger, sorrow, fear. And so this was a pure confrontation with fear that, you know, was the absolute opposite of euphoria, was one of the worst emotions I've ever experienced.
Yes.
And it was the experience, and I describe it in vivid detail in the book, but it was this moment of, oh, what is happening? I have to get away from this. I have to get away from this, get away from this, get away from this. And instead, because I couldn't get away from it, and I had enough rational thinking to be like, this is just a feeling. All this is a feeling. So I made a decision to feel it. And I knew that I was in a safe place. I was with my brothers, Bax and Chemo. I was in Bax's home. I knew I was safe. And I know that's why it happened at that time, because I didn't have my meltdown in front of them. Of course, I escaped, and you know, they later found me lying on the couch, dazed. But so that was a real life-changing experience for me, was that, you know, yeah, I can feel feelings in my hoop that are almost unbearable. And that prepared me for the door of emotion being thrown open. And just as a short answer to your question, I still think it's about flight time, you know, it's about creating safe space, the intention, the belief that I can feel, the belief that I can endure my feelings. I can physically endure them, because when I was only thinking about my feelings or trying to solve my feelings through thinking, I would get to places where it was like, I can't endure this, because for me, underneath it all, that it was that I don't believe that I can physically survive this feeling. I didn't have that belief in my mind, but that's what it was. It was like everything in my being was oriented around, I will not feel this feeling. It's not bearable. But then when I was forced to bear it, really, through that experience, I was forced to bear a feeling that felt unbearable. And in doing so, the moment that I became willing to feel that fear, it drained out of me like this in a second. And so that was also a turning point. And again, why I depicted it in the book was that, oh, I can actually choose to feel my feelings. And that's the transformation, that I am willing to feel it, that I know I can survive it. I know I can bear it, because it's just a feeling.
Right.
It's just a feeling. And so, yeah. So that, I don't know if that shed some light.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I started thinking when you were talking about this, that when I went through my own counseling for PTSD triggers, the counselor said, find a safe place at home. And she told me, I want you to get this book by Ellen Bass. It's called The Courage to Heal. And I want you to process and go very slowly and sit down in your safe place. And if you have an emotional release, which if your listeners don't know, is something comes up that you forgot about, that you didn't know about, or in my case, I had stuffed it down so far, I didn't even know it had happened until this eruption came out. And the first thing I wanted to do was run. But my counselor said, when that happens, remind yourself that you're in a safe place. Stop reading and just sit with the emotion and keep telling yourself that you're okay. You're in a safe place. Bring yourself to the present moment, which is a gift. And if you just need to take a break from that trauma until it heals, like it comes in different ways in your package, it just drained out of you. I felt like this light that came upon me from the inside out that washed away all that pain, and it just left me. So there's other different ways. So getting back to your book, The Tao of Hoop, if somebody is interested in listening and they're saying, gee, I think I'm ready to kind of go to a deeper level within. Intimacy is intimacy. Intimacy. into me see. I want to know who I am. A lot of people that are even adults and they're walking around and their lives are fulfilled and they're like, what's next? They don't know who they are anymore because they've been playing a role. So it sounds like your book could really give an introspective understanding of what am I here for? What's my purpose? Okay, so I go out and I get Ann's book, The Tao of Hoop. I go ahead and I get myself a hula hoop. So how do they put it all together? Do they come to see you online to process the learning? Uh, Mason Walls, thank you both. We're glad you're listening. Thank you so much for your chat. So what do? They get your book, they get a hoop, and then how do they put it all together?
Well, there are a lot of online hoop resources for beginners. And I want to specifically shout out Deanne Love of Australia, who has been online for a long time providing resources, so many resources for beginning hoopers. And I adore Deanne. She's the most generous, wonderful person. There are so many in the hooping community, but Deanne is the person who was the first person to compliment me after I taught my first class live in California in 2008.
Wow.
And so is Hoop Lovers is her Facebook group.
Okay.
So she's got a ton of beginner resources. I also have a series of classes on my website that will teach you how to get the hoop going, like some super basics, getting the hoop going around your waist, turning with the hoop, breaking and reversing, shoulder hooping. So those resources are available. I also have some free tutorials on YouTube that are more of a mix. My YouTube channel is weirdly Hush Puppy Mix 2. So nothing having to do with my name or Line and Circle or Tao of Hoop or anything. That was because I made it so long ago.
What's your website? What's your website?
lineandcircle.com. And I will, yes, pop in. We will answer your question in 1 second. I do want to share though, also Bax is, how do I start? We'll answer, we'll get with you, pop in. I do want to share though that also Baxter has a lot of online hoop resources right now, because he started during COVID teaching a couple of classes per week and a jam every week. Now he's kind of stepped back from the jams, but he's still teaching online hoop classes every Monday and Thursday evening. And so I would highly recommend tuning into Bax's Facebook page, Jonathan Livingston Baxter, or Hoop Path Bax on YouTube or Twitch. And actually the YouTube or the Twitch are the better places to see the streams, because they don't bump them for the music the way they do on Facebook. But so pop in, stop. What are you embarrassing your girlfriend by hooping? That's my question.
I hope it's
to become a better hooper, I would just go back to these resources that I just listed. And just in a nutshell, become a better hooper. You spend time hooping, flight time. If you've been hooping if you're doing it on purpose, then what you do is you make a decision to stop. That's my advice.
Yeah, that sounds like part of growing up, doesn't it?
Yes, you become more mature and you make a mature decision. I'm not going to do this anymore. Okay, good for you. The intention counts.
Yeah. Yes.
So yeah, so it's really the time. Nothing, a lot. Everybody, you're so welcome. Everybody that you see with like a smooth flow, you can guarantee there's hundreds of hours of flight time behind it. Nobody steps into the hoop and immediately becomes like an amazing hooper. It takes time for everybody. And the thing is, it's, like I could not hoop. I tried as a kid. I couldn't do it. And I was very afraid to try as an adult. And it was just because the hoops were so big, so heavy. See, now I would hate to start hooping now, because now everybody's got these tiny hoops and people, want to just start with these little tiny hoops. That's impossible for just about anybody. And I'd say over and over again to adult beginners, like, this hoop, I know it seems like you're going to have an easier time with the small hoop. You're not going to. It's going to be harder. And they'll sort of half believe me and then try the small hoop again. And eventually, if we're hooping for long enough, they'll start to trust my 16 years of experience. and try the bigger hoop. But it's patience. And then the thing about the patience and enduring the awkwardness, it's character building. I've become more willing to do things that I'm not good at
Mm.
because of all those hours that I spent failing at the hula hoop. And in fact, in the book, I talk about it in one of the later chapters. I wrote 6 failed versions of my book before I wrote the one that is now published.
Wow. 6 failed versions? Oh my goodness gracious. That sounds like a lot of experience that you're sharing with us.
Yes, and that would be I would spend a year writing and then get to the end of that year, wait a couple of months, look back and realized that it was complete shit and that I had to start over again. I'm not kidding. I'm
Yeah.
not kidding. I have an extensive background in editing. I've been an editor. I have an MFA in poetry writing. I know what a good piece of writing looks like. And so I would have, like put on my editor's glasses and be like, okay, start over again.
Wow.
But I would not have been able to do that if I had not dropped my hoop 10,000 times.
Yes,
You know,
yes, yes. And
I
I
did not have that character
appreciate
until I
you.
was 35.
I'm glad you're saying that because some people get up there and they act like it's so easy to do that, and they get into the performance mode, and that doesn't really help anybody. So you're very humble and you're very open, and you obviously want to help others on to get into the flow state, which is very, very healing. So who do you see wanting to read your book? Is this for people that are looking for answers? Is what kind of people are going to come across your path that are ready to receive your knowledge?
I appreciate that question a lot. And I did spend all these years writing the book so that it was not accessible only to hoopers and flow artists. I did not want it to be an inside joke type of, only for the inner circle, so to speak. I really thought a lot about the way that I was when I met Baxter, which was I was an extreme snob about a lot of things. And I was not eager to try the awkward, silly looking hula hoop. I was very dignified with my glass of wine. And I wanted to watch the adults awkwardly trying to hula hoop and be like, no thanks. And, I wasn't in a zone where I felt like I needed dance. I did not know that I did not know how to feel. I thought that I was very, I mean, I knew that I was very well educated. I had had innumerable privileges in life. I also did not feel maybe even the right to heal because I had had such a privileged life. And so there was also a lot of ways that I was cutting myself off from healing because, I've already taken so many resources in this world. I just need to give. I don't need to take anymore. But again, if we cannot hope to heal anything in the world before we begin to heal the self. And it's one thing to know that intellectually, but it's a very different thing to experience that. So my book is really aimed at people who are not hoopers and who are not movers. And I purposely wrote it in a way that was funny and engaging and story driven so that people who would not normally want to read about Taoism or people that would not want to read about hula hooping or dance or movement might have a chance. Well, the way that Baxter's good looks, made me sort of sit up and take notice. Hey, there's something here. There's something because the first time I saw Baxter dancing in the hoop, it's like in my mind I was like, oh, I want to meet that cute guy. But really, what had happened was that my whole heart and soul had recognized that which was going to liberate me, and I had seen it, but I didn't know. I still just was like, oh, I was still just in a kind of a conditioned response, like there, this is the way, this is what I understand. I understand that, now there's like another amazing person to meet, but I never would have dreamed that moment would just absolutely change the course of my life forever.
Yes, it sounds like the higher power presents people, places, things to you at a time when you're ready to learn. And sometimes we don't receive these gifts. It sounds like Baxter is a gift to you from the higher power, whoever you understand the higher power to be. But in this life, there's all kinds of treasures, and it's like a treasure hunt. And when you are somehow able to get to a place in your life where you want to overcome your limitations that you put on yourself, and you start to believe that you are made for greater things than maybe you've even ever been told or believe about yourself, then comes this book, The Tao of Hoop. And it's a treasure chest that people can open and find themselves in it and discover things about life and living and all these things. So tell us, what things are in this? What treasures could you tell somebody are in this book? If they open up your book like a treasure chest, what are they going to find?
You know, one of the we haven't talked about this too much. I did refer to him, but another intention that I had in writing the book that was very that really guided me was allowing people to meet not only my father, who died 31 years ago, but also my hoop brother Kim Wan, who introduced me to Baxter and took me to my first hoop class. He was an artist and a professor of art, and he was a really, really exceptional human being. And he died at the age of 47 of a brain tumor, which was the same thing that had killed my dad when I was a teenager. So I'm telling those two stories together in part to share my healing and show how I moved into a truly different space after the hoop came into my life. But I was very eager for people to meet Kim Wan and to know him, because he was as significant to my hoop journey as Baxter in those early years. Like, I would not have met Baxter without him. I would not have gone to the hoop class. And also, and we'll show, yes, you'll see in the book how we would hoop together, the three of us. We had a whole year of hooping together every day for hours and talking. And our conversations were so rich and ongoing and funny. And then you'll see in the book how Kim Wan, he lived with his brain tumor for 18 years. He was diagnosed at the age of 29. So when I met him, he had already been living with the tumor for about 10 years. And also he went through his third and final brain surgery during this period of time that the book is covering. And you also learn about, I think, what it means to be a true artist, because he approached his healing as a creative project. And so I was with him day in and day out for the months and months and years after his surgery. During and after his surgery, he had a really hard time healing from the surgery. He was paralyzed on his left side. He lost a piece of his skull, literally gone, a huge piece. And he went on to walk again, dance again, hoop again, fall in love, get engaged. And actually his former fiance, will be at the reading today in Seattle, which means so much to me. Wow. And so he is a treasure. He is a treasure. Just knowing about him, having a little insight into him, getting turned on to his artwork, which is now collected at the Smithsonian Museum of the American Indian. And my hope is that also this is just a dream of mine, but by shining a light on Kim Wan, that we might see more of his artwork in the public sphere, that we might end up getting a show of his work. Since his death in 2011, there's only been a couple. There's definitely been an art show in Carborough, and then there was an online kind of forum about his artwork almost a year ago, several months ago. Excuse me, but I am just that would be another treasure for me.
This is great. And you're listening to Ann Humphreys. She is an author of this incredibly interesting book called The Tao of Hoop. And I really appreciate everybody in the chat box today with their comments. And Ann, if you would write your website address and your YouTube handle in the chat box so that people can see what it is, and I will spell it while you're writing it. It's www.line, that's LINEAND, circle, CIRCLE.com. And the YouTube handle is Hush Puppy Mix #2. Hush Puppy Mix #2. So I really find you to be quite fascinating and somebody that I couldn't sit down with just once and know everything I needed to know. I would need to see you several times. So you might have a new student on your hands. So what about if somebody like is new to hula hooping and they wanted to join your tribe? What would you recommend?
Well, I would really recommend, if you want hoop community online, I really would recommend Baxter's weekly classes, because I am not doing anything regular like that. I am actually traveling to support the book for the foreseeable future. And in fact, I am planning, I was going to mention this before, but I'm planning on coming to the Deep South, in Atlanta for sure. In like November, December. I'm going to do another leg. This is a sweep of the country. I'm doing a counterclockwise loop, but I am going to go down to Florida, Georgia, Alabama in November, December. So I would love to connect with people on my tour in person.
Okay.
But as far as like, I definitely, for learning beginning skills, my website resources are great, super simple. Deanne's resources are excellent for beginning hoopers. And then you can kind of, spend that time getting some techniques under your belt. And then I think that anybody with like 5 or 10 hours of flight time would feel comfortable in Bax's regular online classes every Monday, every Thursday.
Okay.
And again, he is Hoop Path. I'll write this down. Hoop Path Bax on YouTube and Twitch. Okay. And Hoop Path Bax. That's right. And so that's a great online resource. And Deanne Love, Hoop Lovers, is also a wonderful online community. I have not, as much as I appreciate online community, it has not been my dream to create a hub, because so many people have such great ones, and I am a writer and I love meeting people in person. So I'm trying to do my work of creating that resource, and I would love to network with everybody. I just want to make it clear that my online resources are static.
Okay.
I don't have an organic community, and I have designed it that way because I only have so much like bandwidth and attention. And I do also a lot of community building in person in my home, and also political protest. I'm a very, very active protester and have been for the last 4 years in my area. And so those areas of community building and work take up a lot of the bandwidth that I might otherwise spend on cultivating online flow community. But again, I love Deanne Love. I love Jonathan Baxter. They are there, and they are OGs, and they will hold your hand, and you'll meet other hoopers in those interfaces as well.
Okay, good. All right. That's very, very explicit. That's wonderful. Now, let me ask you, if somebody's going to look for a community, and you mentioned flight time for the first 1 to 25 hours is awkward for everybody. How do you clock those hours? Is it like, if I hoop for an hour, there's 1 hour. If I hoop for 20 minutes, that's 0.20. Is that how you do it?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Flight
okay.
time is always, it's a direct, 1 minute of flight time, 1 minute of hooping is 1 minute of flight time. One
Okay.
hour of hooping is 1 hour of flight time. Therefore, it's so because you could be like, oh, I've been hooping for 3 months, but maybe you hooped 10 times in that
Yeah.
3 months. But if you've been hooping for 3 months and you've been hooping 2 hours a day for 3 months, your hooping is going to look and feel very different. And
Yeah.
you're going to be experiencing very different things in your practice. So Baxter very much drilled in that idea that it's the actual hours that the hoop is around you is
Okay.
flight.
Okay, good. Now you talk about your book tour, and this is very exciting. And you're all listening to Ann Humphreys. I hope you know the name of the book by now. Everybody say The Tao of Hoop. Yay! So how do we find out where to find you on the tour? Like you said, you're coming to Atlanta, November,
Oh,
December. How do people find out your schedule?
I have not posted those dates yet. I need to actually this week, because I'm having a little bit of downtime in Portland. I am going to try to solidify some of those next dates. But my current tour schedule is on my Facebook page. It is my cover photo. So I can link, maybe can I just link to my Facebook page?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
See if
so let
it'll
me
work.
just link to that Facebook page, and then you'll be able to just click on my public cover photo and
Okay, so your book tour schedule, the current tour schedule is on her Facebook page. And of course, you said you're coming to Atlanta November, December, and I'm in Milledgeville, which is 2.5 hours away. So that's a potential day trip for me. So I'm looking
I
forward
have got to see Flannery O'Connor's ancestral home, so I will be coming to Milledgeville.
Too funny.
Have you read it?
I have, but I'm not an avid reader.
Yeah.
So
She's
I mean,
a little heavy as well. She's pretty heavy reading.
yeah. Well, my husband is the avid reader. I'm just not there. I'm a musician, so I'm always writing music. It's just a different genre.
That's me and my brother. I'm the reader writer. He is the musician. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so in the chat box you got facebook.com/hoop path with double P's, HOOPPATH. All right, now, so is this your first book?
I wrote, I have an MFA in poetry writing, and I did write a chapbook of poetry I think it was published in 2001, but my dear friend Ian Wilson has published it through Holly Ridge Press. I think it's still available. It's called Which Lies Are Necessary. This was before hooping. I was very serious. Yeah.
Okay.
So the poems are pretty heavy, but it's, so I do have I'll say, which lies are necessary.
Is that like Emily Dickinson kind of poetry?
I do not rhyme my poetry the way that she did. So skillfully, I'm a huge admirer of Emily Dickinson, as every single living poet is an admirer of Emily Dickinson.
Yeah.
But this poetry, it's definitely not going to be rhyming. You might glimpse yourself. I mean, I think it's kind of stands the test of time. It's just heavy. I was just, real very judgmental of myself. That was something that when I wrote and published the book, I didn't think of that. But now when I look back on it, that's what I noticed the most of all. So much judgment of myself, so much trying to pinpoint my sins, really.
Well, I got that from my mother. It sounds like some kind of learned behavior from somebody that's dysfunctional themselves in authority. They're everywhere. Those experts are all around. They'll keep you gagged and bound forever and ever and ever. So somehow some of us managed to get away. And here we are talking about being liberated through music, through books, through hula hoops, through the tribe of people that I found in my life. I'm 66 years old, and I've never met such a group of people that are loving and accepting, no matter what size you are. I mean, that in itself is a huge obstacle for most people I've ever met, especially at my age. All of a sudden, I start getting these invitations that say, you don't have to be fat like Adele used to be a couple years ago. I'm like, who are you? But so hula hoopers are wonderful. They're seeking healing, they're seeking their path, and they make room for everybody else. And it's not a competition like most other forms of fitness that I've experienced. It's always about, gee, I wish I could do that like she does it. We don't even think like that in the hooping community because it's more healing. It's like we say, wow, look, isn't that wonderful? I recognize that that's a flow state, and I too am working on it. And kudos to you, girl or guy, in your case, Baxter. Okay, so in closing, before I go on a rant here,
Can I make a super quick? I just want to shout out. I'm so sorry. I really want to shout out these two.
You go right ahead. This is your time.
These are online communities for hoopers of all sizes, and I love and respect these women so much. At Ruby Hooping, I'm going to add this here.
Okay.
At Ruby Hooping, she is an amazing goddess.
Okay.
And she gathers people from all over. And I also want to shout out Black Girl Hoopin'.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Black Girl Hoopin', who is in Chicago, and I missed meeting her, but she is also an incredible
Black girl.
badass.
I think I've seen her on Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram. Yeah. Black Girl Hooping on Instagram and Ruby Hooping on Instagram. And actually, I guess, yeah. Anyway, just amazing online communities. So just a quick shout out to them.
Absolutely. And again, she's saying at Ruby, RUBY Hooping, and at Black Girl Hooping, BLACKGURLHOOPIN. Hoopin.
No G.
Open. Yeah. All right. So give us one little more nugget before we say goodbye. One more nice frosting in the cake word that you can leave us with.
Honestly, I think centering the fact, and maybe not a word, but what I think was truly revolutionary about the hoop is that it brought me into my physical center. I didn't need to go through therapy. I didn't, it's like you talk about centering yourself, finding your center. What does that mean?
Right.
What
exactly.
does it mean? And I used to actually have a lot of frustration with expressions like that. Like I would be, when I was thinking more than feeling, I could not understand the expression, let it go. I would have arguments with friends like, I don't know what you're talking about. And people would say to me, you're so analytical, you overanalyze things. And I would be like, that statement has no meaning to me.
Right. I mean, when Paul McCartney sang it, I feel like letting go. I'm like, what do you mean? Letting go of what?
Yeah, it's like that doesn't mean anything. But then once I became physically centered and physically oriented, becoming physically centered, the hoop drew me into my physical center, that drew me into my body, that allowed me to feel, and it just simplified these things that had seemed absurd and just unrelatable before.
Exactly. So tell us in closing, where do people find your marvelous book?
Oh gosh, I've got to get this link. It's on. This is so terrible.
No, this is good. I love the energy.
I'm just saying it's on Amazon, and I wish. I've had many conversations now about, is there any way I can buy it not on Amazon? And I did a lot of research, and I wanted the book to be available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. So the first two are available right now on Amazon, and I'll add that link right here, right now.
Okay.
And the audiobook, is almost ready. And that's something, that I really hope I'm going to be able to. Here we go. No, that's the Kickstarter. Wow.
Okay.
I think let me just grab it on Firefox because, here it is. Yay. Here we go. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat.
Okay.
And then, yeah, cool. And so that will take you to there's the Amazon link for the ebook and the paperback. And then if you come see me on my tour, of course, you can get a signed copy.
Ooh, that's good.
Personally. So I'm reading today in Seattle at 1 p.m. I'm reading on Wednesday evening in Portland at 6 p.m. Saturday in San Francisco, Sunday in Los Angeles. So a lot of readings coming up this week. And if you're in any of those places, you can get a paperback from me personally. And then the audiobook, I'm going to try to wrap it up in, I have no idea. There's just like one last thing, editing thing to do. And I don't know how many hours it's going to take. I'm hoping I can do it this week.
Okay. All right. So you have been listening to Ann Humphreys. What a delight. What a treasure you are. And your book is going to be a treasure chest of knowledge and experiences and all kinds of good stuff. So I encourage you to go to Amazon.com and look for her book, The Tao of Hoop, and also find her website, www.line, L-I-N-E, and circle.com, or on YouTube, her handle is Hush Puppy Mix 2. That's Hush Puppy Mix 2. So thank you so much for being here, Ann.
Thank you so much.
Getting to know you, getting to know all about you. And I'll have to meet you when you come on the book tour in the Atlanta area. Absolutely. So looking forward to it. Thank you very much. And if anybody listening would like to be a guest on the show, the website is https:// happs.tv/invite/@ Deborah, Debra Cohen. So thank you very much. Good luck on your book tour. We hope you'll come back.
Thank you so much. This is so much fun.
Yeah, so much fun. I really appreciate you. Stand by, Ann, after we close the show. Thank you so much for being here in the chat room. You've all been precious to us. Thank you so much. And don't forget to get Ann's book real soon. Bye.
Bye.
Pick up your hoop.